chat after when you finish.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll do it.
I got in this one.
Hey. Answer my question, so probably still need to finish to answer my question. So I don't want to be rude. You know what I mean?
Hey, Jamie, can you tell him that?
I can't tell him anything because I'm not into the other room. But I'm in this
man.
one. That's why I was standing by to make sure I clicked fast enough to get a spot.
Oh man.
Don't worry.
Hey, Steve, are you in both rooms, Steve?
Sorry?
Are you in both rooms still, Steve?
No, I'm just in.
Okay, I see. Everyone's switching. Cool.
There he is.
Yeah.
If that happens again, just go to your main system audio and just turn off your module, and it should kick in automatically.
The thing is, let's see. Yeah, Hangouts was receiving audio, but it wasn't transmitting it. And it's happened in the past, and the coming to configuration and changing voice to studio. Anyway, well, yeah, I'll try that next time, Jamie. Thanks for the advice. So let's just have a couple of minutes for people to join.
Manuel said his phone is dead, so he couldn't hang out any further.
Manuel's phone?
Yeah, he said his phone was dying and he couldn't recharge it. So.
Oh well, sorry for that. We've got one more spot though. but yeah, we'll send them the recorded chat. It's a pity because it was a great question. It's something that it's so hard at the beginning. I mean, to be fair, because he was trying. Sometimes we see things more complex than they are, and that's totally normal because our music doesn't sound the way we want it, right? And we are trying somehow to make it sound better compared to someone else's mixes, and we will think it's not the music, it's the mix. And to be fair, I'll expand on mixing depth, and I'll explain how to get those percussion sounding, punchy, but still not too far away. But just I would like to reiterate to I can stress this further. It is at 80% of our sound. It's gonna be the arranging part of it. When we are composing, that's where we are gonna make our percussion sound epic and powerful, and where we are going to get the depth that we need. It's and then mixing, it's gonna make an improvement, but there's nothing we can fix during the mixing process if we did it wrong during the composing. So sometimes it is so much more simple. It's the way we arrange things that is gonna make our music sound good. The way an orchestra gets recorded in a good sample library, it's enough for it to have the depth that it needs when we put it all together. And we may say, yes, but I am using this strings library from this company and then the brass from another company, and how is this gonna work together, as in they're playing in the same room, and and what about the size of the room, really? Because the brass should be sitting like 3.5 meters away in that room, but in another room maybe it's 4 meters away. It's such a small difference, really, that it is very common to use different all the music that I post, and most of the music that you'll hear that sounds outstanding and it's a good sounding orchestral mockup, it's produced with different sample libraries from different companies, and it's just the way it is, and it doesn't really make that big of a difference unless it's two very different sounding libraries. Let's say you're using Symphobia brass for some generic brass hits, and then we've got Elias scoring strings for strings writing, and then we would have to add a little bit of reverb to the layer scoring strings because they sound much drier than Synthobia for sure. That'd be an example. But yes, if we would load our sample labs and we just leave them the way they are, that's gonna be enough for the orchestral depth to sound, to get the orchestral depth, the realistic orchestral depth. Now, if we want to enhance that, then we will apply the rule of high long notes, short lower range notes. That's all we need, and then that's why we set up stems the way we do, because the reverbs, we are applying them when we are mixing. Usually I don't have any reverb in my template, but if you see, let me share the screen real quick here, and just stop me and ask any question if you have any question. But here's my screen. You won't see me for a second. Those are this is my template. Okay, it's not a big template. Maybe 500 tracks, but again, it is not a big template. For when we are starting out, it's 500 is a lot, but these days a big template it's usually 2000. It's like the big template, like back in the days, back like in 2008, 2009, a big template was like 200-300 tracks. These days, a big template it's 2000 tracks, because you can have that many tracks. You would need for that to run smoothly, like I don't know, like 200 gigs of RAM, something like that, and that's doable with like a couple, like two computers, like one main computer and then a server. Slave machine running PE Pro with like 128 or 256 gigs of RAM. It's expensive, but you can accommodate that easily. Okay, medium template sort of thing, 500 tracks. I don't have any plugin really loaded because when you have a big template, if you had a bigger template, you can't really think, okay, I'm gonna have different reverbs inserted in different returns. It's not going to happen. So all those tracks that you are seeing, they are returns. Okay, and that then every return is routed to a bus here. Cubase calls them group channels, right? And you'll see what we've got here is high strings, short. Like strings short, high, strings short, low, strings long, high, strings long, low, etc. And the same concept for the rest of the orchestral families, orchestral sections, and that will allow for me to export those stems and then mixing afterwards in a new project, but still keeping the flexibility that will allow me to because I have these long high strings, I can add more reverb to this stem that I exported afterwards when I'm mixing. I can add more reverb here and less reverb to the strings short low, for example. So that's why we are exporting the stems the way we are, because of the reverbs setup that we are, or the reverbs that we will be applying afterwards. If that makes sense at all.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
How are you? Yeah, I had a little bit of the same doubt as Manuele, but I suppose that we could have like two main styles, like sort of John Williams old style orchestral music, and on the other hand, we will have like Hans Zimmer. He really produce music, right? So if we would like to get a sort of realistic realistic orchestra, so wouldn't be more coherence to have only one reverb, or at least only one algorithm? I mean, not different halls or different places, right? Like like it should be only one orchestra, so they are in a same hall. I know that they have been recorded in different halls, but sort of like giving them a little bit of same hall, same
Yes,
concert hall.
yes, that's
What do you think about it?
that's totally the approach that I would take, Bernabe. That, you know, if you wanna go, that's exactly how I see it. You don't have to agree with me here, but the way I see it is right the way Bernabe described it. If you want a more produced, you know, Hans Zimmer, let's say Hans Zimmer, or remote control, or, you know, more modern orchestral sound, then you will do all that. You'll expand you'll use mixing concepts that will bring the orchestra beyond the, you know, the orchestral sound, and you will gain things like more clarity, it's punchier, bigger, you know, closer sometimes, while some of the elements will sound farther away, so a greater mixing depth, etc., or wider panning, stuff like that. But if you want to go for the John Williams, Michael Giacchino, this type of more standard orchestral sound, then you're gonna use the samples the way they are. You're going to take care of making sure that the balance is right when we are composing. You know, the balance is going to be right. You know, we don't want to have the woodwinds too hot or the cellos that stand out too much. You know, the balance got to be right for it to sound realistic. And then maybe we can apply like an overall reverb to the whole thing. I recommend cutting a little bit the low end of the third screen real quick. When we are adding just one reverb to the whole thing, I recommend cutting out the low end a little bit, just so you know, we get rid of the muddiness in the mid lower. This is just spaces, for example. This is a convolution reverb. We just cut it a little bit, starting at, you know, 300, something like that, and cut the low end, just to you know, to avoid madness in the mid low end, which is, you know, when all the problems will start happening. But yes, I think just one reverb for the whole thing, it's gonna make the orchestra sound a little bit more wet, and you're gonna have that more let's say traditional orchestral realistic type of sound. So that's totally, thanks for bringing that up, Bernabe.
Maybe I don't know, maybe with I mean the same algorithm, the same sample, or the same preset, but so we would have the same color, right? But maybe with different dry signal, wet, different sense, amount of sense.
Exactly.
We would need, I don't know, violins. They are closer than trumpet, for example. I don't know, but
yeah,
like different sense.
Absolutely, yeah. If you guys, I think, well, I don't know if Bobby touched that. By the way, I spoke to Bobby right yesterday, and but if you watch the video, the interview with Bobby, he mentioned that briefly, exactly what Bernabe is saying. And when you speak to Bobby, he is more of a sort of a old school mixing engineer, which, you know, he knows every technique, right? But he likes more like the orchestral sound. So when he explains his techniques, usually he'll say exactly what Bernabe said, which is, you know, we'll have just one reverb, and we'll set up sends, and we will send less, less from the violins, let's say, when they are playing maybe short staccato fast notes, and maybe if we've got, let's say, and the next passage, maybe we've got long high strings, then we may add more reverb, or we may add more stuff for the brass and less for, depending on how we want to make it sound. We didn't have to add or insert our reverb in the master master output track sort of thing. We don't have to add a reverb here, and that's it. We can set up different sends and send different amounts to one overall reverb. That's sort of the approach. And why is that? Why that it's gonna make it sound more traditional, more like sort of this realistic traditional orchestra, was because back in the days they didn't have that many plugins. They couldn't insert. They had the lexicon, right? They had like the hardware reverb units. They didn't have like 5-10 boxes, like hardware boxes that they could insert or route in like in every different track. What they had is one lexicon reverb, or let's imagine back in the sorry, let me just real quick. Yeah, 5.1. When a 5.1 are 6 channels, and back in the days they would use 3 stereo boxes. So it's 3 reverbs, just with the same settings for the 5.1. So the way they had it is they had the analog, the hardware reverb set up, and then they had the mixing board, and they would send different sends to the reverb. And that's the way they did it. They didn't have more reverbs, and so if we want to emulate that sound, we're gonna go with one reverb. So yeah, that's.
Mark, can I ask you a question about, as long as we're on this topic, about plugins? I'm having problems with the UAD plugins, and they're really slowing down my system. If I plug them in, I'm using Logic, if I insert into a Logic channel, because I guess I love analog also. Like, who the heck doesn't love analog? It sounds fantastic. You get it. And I got these plugins, but they slow everything down like insanely. So the only other choice would be if I could insert it into the board that is that's running on my computer, the UAD software board, if you will, or and that allows you to lay down the track already with the effect already placed on it. So you're losing that opportunity to retouch it up afterwards, if you will. So I guess what's normal for plugins like this that are emulating analog sounds, if that makes any sense?
Yes, it does. The answer would be if you are buying a PCI UAD board that cost you a lot of money, and you're buying those. I use them, and you are loading those plugins. It should not slow your system down at all. It's this template at the moment, I don't have them loaded, but I use UAD plugins just because I can load plugins in my template and it is not affecting my CPU because my computer is busy enough. I just use the UAD plugins when I'm composing. When I'm mixing, I'll use other plugins. But when I'm composing, if I have some plugins which I do have loaded in my stems, in my buses here, my group channels, I just have UAD plugins. They are not the best plugins. They sound great, but there are other plugins that sound as good as them. But the concept of having them running in an external board or a satellite or an internal PCI board, it's for me, it's so stable, so fast, doesn't add latency. Well, it does add a little bit of latency, but it just works so smooth for me. Do you have like a problem like loading them makes it adds latency to your system or makes it go slower, or what's
I could tell you first of all, I'm guilty of having not a good enough computer. As if I'm listening to you talk about the amount of RAM, I'm like, oh gosh, I have to connect my computers together or go buy a new Mac Pro or something like that, because I only am using an iMac that's maxed out all around. So I decided to spend my money on SSD hard drives and taking 4 SSD hard drives and zero rating them together to get enough speed in the streaming of the instruments, because so many of them are, especially these Spitfire instruments, they're heavy. So if you want them to come through well enough, you need that component of it. But I think I really fell short on the if I put a reverb in, for example, and I don't use the UAD onboard, the onboard board that they give you, it slows down Logic like crazy. It's like it kills it.
It will do that. They're pretty heavyweight. That's If you're
Especially
using
reverb is ridiculous. That one kills you really badly.
Yeah, if you're using the UAD hardware, that offloads all the processing to the onboard DSPs in the UAD box. So that frees up your system resources on your computer. But yeah, if you try to get the computer to process, do the processing for the UADs, it'll kill it. Yeah, definitely.
Because I do have UAD hardware. I've got two pieces. I've got a satellite, and I also have a amplifier. So I don't understand why Logic is taking on that responsibility and why isn't it just passing through? Or is there a setting that cuts off your DAW from even processing and says automatically send this channel to the external box? Or is it just taken care of in the scripting?
Are you running the UAD console software in conjunction with Logic?
Yes, sir.
There should be a little status screen that pops up that shows you the processing power and memory drag and everything on the UAD box.
Yep, it's got DSP, PGM, and memory, and those are very low. But if I put in a plugin, often Logic will just process it directly and won't offload that to that slave software, which is supposed to work, I guess, automatically, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. Mark, have you ever encountered that?
No, that actually should be impossible because they don't actually let the plugins to be processed by the i7 CPU that an iMac is gonna use. It's not designed to process those plugins. It's just a different architecture. It shouldn't be possible. Yeah. What I found is that when I'm pushing, when I'm reaching the max, I'm loading more UAD plugins on a 70%, 80%, 90%, then Cubase starts acting a little bit funny. It doesn't like for my UAD boards to be maxed out. That my computer or my Cubase or whatever it is doesn't like that. So solution is buying more boards. Yeah.
Maybe you should talk to UAD about it and see. There might be something.
It's a good idea.
Sorry for are you using a satellite? You said, is it a Firewire or is it a Thunderbolt satellite?
I'm using two things. I'm using a satellite, and I'm also using the let me look at this. Hold on, I'll give you a view here. The Apollo 8. So
that's what I have.
That should handle this no problem. So between that, oh, by the way, I bought this. Thank you for the recommendation.
Nice.
Nice. And here's the Apollo Twin. That's my water and my breakfast. Here you've got the the Universal Audio. It's a UAD2 satellite, and I forget the terminology that they use. It's like it's not teeth or it's something weird, like the amount of power. They don't go by a normal word. They just renamed the word for memory. I forget.
Yeah.
So with all that, it should work okay. But my real killer is the fact that I've got this. I went with this kind of computer because I just thought it was an iMac was a great deal. I figured it'll work fast enough. And, I never in a million years thought I was ever going to have a template with this many tracks. I didn't even realize you could load them up because I think, speaking to what you were saying, the template that I ultimately put together, I went into Spitfire and I picked symphonic strings, and I just literally loaded every single string in there, so I could just pick the one I want and turn on Contact when I need it. And that seems like the most logical thing to do. I just had no idea that it could actually hold that much. So, to the point of templating, the devil is really in your template, because without the template, I just don't see how you could write. And I've been struggling for a long time, not realizing that workflow is even a component to think about. So,
yes, that's correct. But it's in the other hand, and I'm sure you'll agree with me. It's gotta be a template that's efficient, right? Because you've got a template that it's still not like it doesn't allow you to work fast. I would prefer having a smaller template with not that much stuff, but that just it lets me just sit down and start playing, and it sounds okay. I don't have any memory, RAM, processing problem. I'm gonna prefer keep it smaller, than trying to make it bigger and start having resources problem. Just there's a rule usually that a computer you can't load more than a 70-80%. You can't go with your computer running at 90% of either memory or CPU, because the computer will have other processes and will start acting funny. And so it's always better to be using stuff at 30-40%. It's that's gonna make things. Let me just real quick share the screen.
but your template is how many hundred? You said your template several hundred.
Like 500, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty solid. No, or do you just have most of them turned off and you just turn on a few, and that's all that really matters?
No, I explained the modular concept, the modular template concept. I explained it, but I don't use it. It's the modular template is fantastic. It's great. But I have like a small enough, a big enough template that it's my to-go template. It's 500 track. Here's the template, without no playback. You can see it running at my computer at 50, 18, 20%, something like that. Plus streaming audio and video, at the moment. So this is my template. And usually, when I'm playing back like a trailer, like action cue, it may go up to 40, 50%, but that's about it. Using the libraries that load a lot of memory, I don't like them. I prefer using libraries that will load fast and just won't use that much memory. Yes, there are some libraries that sound great that will load a lot of memory, but will have to sacrifice some memory. I don't have that much memory, really. 64 gigs of RAM, using like 50, something like that. But I wouldn't go using more than 50. If I use more than 50, I'll upgrade my RAM, because if you're using more RAM, then your system is gonna start loading some of the samples, of loading them from the RAM and loading them in the hard drives, and that's gonna make it clicks and pops, and we don't want that.
So Mark, you're saying 50 gigs out of 64, not 50%, but 50 gigs out of 64.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. That's I usually keep mine at like 50%. So.
Yeah, it's that would be much safer for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know no one said this, but it's becoming incredibly apparent that I have to go to the Apple Store this afternoon and buy a new computer.
It's gonna be either that, because are you Logic?
Yeah, I'm Logic.
Yeah. Okay, then it's gonna be that.
Which iMac are you using, Jamie?
It's the big one. I know that's not going to help. Let me look. I'll give you the exact.
Yeah, it's a recent one, right? Yeah.
It's no, it's a 5K Retina screen. It's not that recent. It's time goes a lot faster when you get older, right? This is 2014. When I was younger, I would throw it out every year. I'd get a new one, and now I'm like, I could kind of make this work for a little while. I have another old Mac Pro where I upgraded the board. I actually put in another SSD board that serves as the startup disk, which is a fairly quick thing. But the more I look at this, the more I realize you're shooting yourself in the foot without the right gear. You might as well not even start if you can't possibly get to your goal ultimately. So.
Yeah, I mean, my master computer is an iMac. It's the 2016 version, but that's what I'm running, and granted, I run 4 slaves off of it, but still, it holds quite a bit of the template, and so yeah, the iMac is great.
We've got one student here who's got this. this 3 Mac Mini setup, and actually Bear McCreary's assistant, like the composing team that he's got. So if you were to work for Bear McCreary as additional music composer, and you either work from his studio or from home, but they will provide the system for you, and their system is a 3 Mac Mini setup. One main computer, 2 slaves, BE Pro, and they've got the tech guy there to set up the system for you. And the 3 Mac Mini maxed, I think, how much a Mac Mini can go from 16 or 32, maybe 32 these days. I don't know. But definitely not much. But yeah, unloading stuff from your main computer to the slaves, it's one way to go. So what are the specs of your slaves, William? Your slave computers?
I have 2 iMac slaves that are the same as my master slave. I mean, my master iMac, so they're the 4K with 64 gigs of RAM. And then I have 2 PCs, i7 with 64 gigs of RAM in those. And then everything's running off of SSDs.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what
I take that back. One of my sample drives is a spindle drive, but it's a super fast.
Yeah.
Hey, William, could you paste that program into the window that you use to use the slave computers in the main computer? I know we talked about it last week, but I just haven't been successful in finding it to download it.
Oh, VE Pro?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry to bug you with it. I just figure we'll have it for the record here.
Yeah, no. Let me find it really quick for you. It's on the Vienna library the Vienna website's kind of hard to find.
Also, I appreciate what you're saying, because I realize that you don't need to get the best computers out there in the world in order to be able to compose, as long as you connect smaller powered computers together. Definitely a cheaper option, because I don't know about you guys, but there's just it's like a bottomless pit of money that you could spend on this. Buy and buy and buy until you're broke.
Exactly. It's about finding It's about finding the right configuration. I changed my 3 smaller UADs to 1 bigger UAD card just because of that. Just because it wasn't really working, and so I guess I thought, I'm gonna sell those and I'm gonna buy a new one. And that's the trick. That's the lie that you tell yourself. I'm gonna sell those and then I'm gonna buy a new one. But you buy the new one first. You buy the new one first, and they're still here. But yeah, indeed, it shouldn't. But I found with my system that it works smoother having an 8-core one than having like 2-3 smaller ones. I found, but it could be also my systems or my motherboards, PCI Express slots that aren't configured the right way, or the motherboard's not that updated, or whatever it is. So it could be anything. If you are with a Mac, usually those things won't happen. With a PC, putting together, because I built my own PC, and putting together different PCs and making sure that they all like each other. It hasn't happened for past builds. For this build, which is like the best of everything that I could find, it's more of a rare PC, and so sometimes they aren't kind to each other. So the CPU and the RAM sometimes, or the motherboard, won't recognize some of the RAM, etc. So it took me a little bit to get the system running smoothly. But anyway, it makes sense. If whenever if you want to save some money, a PC, it's gonna be a better option because you can configure it the way you want it, and it's in the end, if you are Logic and you want to have a Mac, you could keep your Mac and then buy some cheaper i7 PCs as a slave machines, because that's gonna cost you $900, and you're gonna have a powerful PC with 32 gigs of RAM and an i7 processor, and that's more than you need for you could go higher and have more RAM. Maybe not 900, maybe with 900 you get 16 gigs of RAM, but you'll have a very powerful slave computer you can attach to your main computer, and you don't have to buy a new computer and do all the migration of all your software, etc. Just have the same computer that's working, and you just offload stuff to a new slave computer, which is a PC, which is not that expensive. And the BE Pro, which is what we've been talking this week, William was mentioning, you talked last week. BE Pro is going to be cross-platforms. You can have it in several, you can have it installed in a PC slave and in your Mac main computer. So that's good. So
thank you, Martial, for your comment. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, great questions. So going back to William's question about percussion, how to make it sound punchy, and still move it far away, and also Marshall question. Matthew mentioned here in the YouTube stream. I'm gonna paste his configuration, which is, let me see, sort of, it's what I had before this computer. And I can, here's the configuration. He's got a Mac Pro 3.7. I don't know how many cores. I guess it's going to be like an 8 or 12. It's going to be something like that. Maybe he'll answer that in a second. 32 gigs of RAM. It says 2013. I had a similar PC. It was I think it was even lower specs. It was an i7. It was the i7 2600. So it's an old CPU. It's 2011, I would say, CPU, and 32 gigs of RAM. And 5 terabytes of SSD drives. So that's what I had in the past. And with that computer, I would do several TV movies a year. And again, it's not about, your system is important. It is so important. But at the end of the day, it's not how powerful it is. It's how good you are with your system, how good you know your system, and how to make it sound good. And that's what takes time, to have them sounding the right way. And sometimes we will sort of focus on making it as big as possible and having as many instruments as possible. I would say what we have to focus on is on how to make it, I would say, how to make it efficient enough for you, so you can compose fast and you feel comfortable writing the music style that you are good at. That's my template is not, it's not something that one day I sat down and I built my template. My template is, I didn't build my template. I just, one day I started composing, right, several years ago, and I thought, this track, I'm gonna use it often. I'm just gonna keep this track here in this project, and then the next project I would open that one, and I kept tracks, and I got rid of tracks, and at some point those are the tracks that I've been using for years. So I know where they are, I know the color, I know how they sound, I know how to reach, if it's got a weird transition from the modulation, or I know it where it is. So I know my samples and my template, and that's I guess why I am able to compose fast whenever I've got this TV movie coming, 60 minutes of music, and they say you've got 2 weeks and a half. It's like, okay, whatever, no problem. And I keep working with them.
Mark, the next time that happens, you've got about 10 of us here that would be happy to write, 10 minutes. And, it would be done in 2 seconds. It would be really quick,
Ghostwriters.
Yeah. Don't you think I haven't thought about that?
Yeah.
We're here, just say the word. Yeah.
Start your own remote control productions, Mark.
Yeah.
You'd be bigger than Hans within a year. Come on.
Exactly. Yeah. While you already know my techniques, because you've learned them during the course. Anyway, yeah, great one. So percussion, punchy percussion. The so there's one thing with percussion that I guess, William, it's happened to all of us. Usually we wanna move them farther away because we want this, we want it to sound big and far away, but still keep that punch. And the farther we move it away, the more reverb it has, the less punch. It's like, what's happening? This is not the sound that I want. And I couldn't manage to have percussion that would sound punchy and like trailer cinematic type of percussion. And so basically, because at USC we had one day with Dennis Sands, mixing engineer for Danny Elfman, many of the classic composers. So he sent us an email at some point with the sample libraries that Alan Silvestri was using for Team A Team movie. And
Do you have that email? Because I would love to see.
So with that email, I sent him an email one day, and I said, "Hey, Dennis, is it okay if I just crash your studio one day and see you mixing? I won't ask any question," which that was a big lie, but I'll just be there for a while. Is that okay for you? And he was like, "Well, yes, whatever. As long as you don't teach those techniques, it's okay." No, he said, "Yeah, definitely. It's just." And they are, and I've done that so many times, just going to see how they mix, because it's, when they are mixing, it's, for them, is if they have someone there, it's someone that they can talk to and they can share their techniques, which, they love doing. So he was mixing at the moment Alice in Wonderland, and there was a big queue with heavy percussion track, and so I had that concern. So what I learned that day is that generally the percussion stem is gonna sound very dry when you isolate, when you separate all that from the rest of the orchestra and you listen, out of context. It's gonna sound very, very dry and very in your face. You may have some instruments, some of them, that sound farther away. You may have some toms or some stuff that's got, or some dolls, or that will have this more longer tail, but most of them are gonna stay very, very in your face. So that is something that it blew my mind, because I thought if I want the percussion to sound big, it's gotta sound big, and in order to sound big, we're gonna have more reverb, so it simulates a bigger room, or having a convolution reverb that simulates a bigger room. But it's not the way they do it, and so if you listen to most of my music, when I isolate my percussion track, it sounds very dry. It has some hits, maybe the taikos, like the hard hits that they hit not in the member but in the wood, maybe those I'll have those with more reverb, which again, that's a higher range type of, higher frequencies type of hit, more reverb there. But especially for the mid low percussion, we want to have no reverb, or let them the way they are. I like using I use the Epic series from the old Tone Hammer libraries. I haven't even updated them. They are lighter, Tone Hammer. I use those, and they will allow you to control the tail of the room sound. So sometimes I'll be programming that percussion, and maybe at the end, the last hit, I'll bring it up just for that last hit. But for the rest of them, I'll bring down. Basically, it'll cut the the reverb tail from that original room. So I'll have two things. One, it'll appear to sound closer, and I'll gain clarity for that percussion track, because punchiness, it's another way of saying clarity. If you want to sound punchy, you need clarity, and clarity, especially in the mid-low end, which is where everything starts to be messy. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just saying that the percussion usually has a lot of mid-low end information, especially the epic percussion. Yeah, go ahead.
So in essence, you're really allowing the reverb on the rest of the orchestra to create the illusion, and it in the context of the mix itself, it sort of gives the impression that there's more space around the percussion than there really is when you isolate out the stem. I
guess that would be the psychoacoustic effect, or the way our brain understands, or
our
makes
brain
it
fills in the rest. Yeah, that's interesting.
Exactly. If usually there are many soundtracks, right, that will have the pre-records for percussion that it's gonna be all samples, but sometimes with big budget movies, they'll have everything recorded with some samples for enhancing, and the percussion, sometimes they'll record the percussion. If it's orchestral percussion, sometimes they're recorded with the orchestra. If it's non-orchestral percussion, most of the times they will have it recorded the next day or the day before.
Right.
And so it is. They usually either recorded in a smaller room, and that's what blew my mind again. Okay, smaller room, and I'm like, why? It's more control, drier sound again. Or they recorded in the same room with enhancing the close mics over the Decca tree. Again,
that's what I was wondering. Is you could automate with a lot of the libraries. You could automate the close mics to bring out the punches and then bring them back when you want more distance. That's interesting. The idea of the implied space around the percussion.
Yeah, which actually
you brought.
Yeah. No, it's like when I'm here. Well, when I'm here, because another good thing about having the bass tracks, the group tracks ready here, is that when you are composing, this is my composing template. When you are composing, you may just want to hear the percussion, and I'll come here and just hear the percussion and solo the percussion, and or the orchestra or the percussion, whatever it is here. And so whenever I solo this, like, this track is gonna need a lot. This stem is gonna need a lot of reverb afterward. But the truth is, whenever you add the reverb, you lose everything, clarity and punchiness, everything. So yeah. That's the way it is. And sometimes, again, I like having one of the percussion instruments generally more wet, and that helps enhancing just the percussion depth a little bit.
Right.
But it sounds so dry when I saw it. It's like, wow, that's not what I need. But yeah. So same thing with synths. Same thing with synths. For those more electronic, in your face type of synths, they generally sound very dry. Good balance for percussion, it's also important. It's about finding that sweet spot where you have the orchestra, the percussion, it's powerful enough so it brings that punchiness, but it's not too loud so it overpowers the orchestra and we can hear the orchestra, but not bringing down that much that the orchestra sounds louder and the percussion doesn't have the drive that it needs. So it's finding that sweet spot. And then finally, balance left to right percussion, super important. We don't want to have, a percussion track like percussion when all the percussion instruments gotta be balanced, gotta be panned in a way that it does the left. Let me just left side, the right side does. They both sound compensated in volume. We don't want to have the left side to be heavier or something like that. So that's important. And finally, we do not have that one patch, that one instrument that sounds outstanding that you will hit and say, wow, it sounds big. It's usually a combination of different sounds. And what's gonna make our track sound punchy, it's the definition. And if we're using this big hits sound and we want it to sound, to have more power, more drive, more weight in the mix, and we will bring it up in volume, right? But generally, what that will do is that will bring up some frequencies that we're gonna conflict with, let's say, the cellos. Sometimes adding some like bamboo sticks hits, like and doubling those big hits, it's gonna add a little bit of definition to that hit, and it's gonna make our track cut, like the percussion track, cut through the mix a little bit better, while not increasing the overall volume and overpowering the orchestra, if that makes sense. It's about orchestrating that percussion bed, that percussion track. So it's that independent. If we would separate it from the orchestra, it still's got that, that it's independent. It could work just by itself, but it's got everything that it needs to sound powerful and epic. So yeah, it takes. Sometimes it takes. And again, it's going back to that idea of music happens during the arrangement, during the composing. It's when 80% of the sound comes from you as a composer making a good arrangement, and then we've got mixing, etc. But that's what's gonna make the bigger difference. And if it's okay with you guys, I'm gonna answer Marshall's question, and it's gonna be the last one because I've got my in-laws, and today's Griffith Observatory in Rodeo Drive. They and I have to take him to see Hollywood. Anyway, so Marshall, how do you decide the balance between the closed mics and the room mics with libraries, for example, Cinebrass? It seems that there's a point to where too much room reverb is too much. Yes, it is. Let me show my configuration of how I set up the close. I like the Decca Tree sound. Every time if you've been in a scoring stage, or if you've recorded yourself in a big room, the far mics are gonna sound too far. The close mics are gonna sound too close. The Decca Tree is the orchestral sound that we are so used to. Let me find Cine. Let's just see this a bit bigger. Okay, let's do this. Let me share the screen real quick. Okay, so my strings. Cool. So I like the Roomy preset. This is they've got the Dennis Sands preset, then Dry and Close and Roomy. That's what I use, and basically it's off all the spot and full mics. And believe it or not, I have the close and the room mics. Basically, it's 100% room mics, and let's say 85% maybe close mics. So it's, I don't know if you can hear that. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
It doesn't have that much. Let's see if we can find the shorter. Yeah. Let's see if we can find the arch. Those are the Cine strings. The Cine strings, they don't have that many fans really. It's a library that it's, but just for loading a library. And it still sounds quite dry, even though it got recorded in the Sony scoring stage, which is the biggest one in town. And I'm using this more roomy setting. Still sounds dry. If you compare it to any of the Spitfire, let me just load the same cello here, Spitfire
I was just going to ask you that question, so I'm glad you're doing that.
See, this is Spitfire. Look at that. That's a cello. It's much longer decay time. It's so long.
Yeah, Mark, we're mentioning on the Spitfire that their recording technique, from what I remember of it, they actually lay it off to 2-inch tape, and then they go ahead and sample it off of the 2-inch tape. So you're getting that analog sound built into their digital print.
That's the old, like, I don't know about the new ones, but yes, you are 100% right. Yes, and that isn't that cool.
Yeah, I guess that's. Could you also just? I'm not sure if I'm allowed to ask any more questions, but in your screen that you have showing, their instruments are stacked on top of each other in the contact window, right there.
Yes.
So, I know this is probably a sophomore question. I'm sorry, I just never understood why you need all of them at one time. Why you shouldn't have them in separate channels, and what the value is, and how do you do it?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. Just optimizing space and resources in a way, because having one contact, it's gonna take a tiny amount of CPU processing. And with contact, it wouldn't be that big of a problem. But having 500 tracks and loading 500 contacts, it would be too much. And in contact, you can load 16 channels. You can load at least 64, but in most of the sequencer, it's gonna make sense just loading 16. So it's just an optimizing way. It makes things a little more complicated and complex in terms of routing. It does, but it just it is a way for me to optimize and organize. I would say for me it's more of an organizing thing, because afterwards I will come here and I will save this multi as my strings. Okay, and if I'm composing, I'll have the epic percussion or action textures, orchestral enhancements. So those are like strings. I've got the John Williams brass orchestra percussions, and I've got sets of contact multi-patches or contact instances that I can recall afterwards. It's another way of approaching modular template sort of thing. I will open a blank contact and I will load those tracks here. And I'll with loading those tracks, I don't just have the tracks loaded. I also have the balance, right? All the balance, it's there because I saved it. All the panning is there. You see, this is 14 to the right, and this one is 11 to the right. So all the balance and everything, my template sounds right to me, because all those little things that I've been tweaking over the years. And when I save this multi, I can, just, if I'm composing with a friend, I will just, I'm making sure that it's got the same libraries. I'll use the same. Or if I'm starting a new template, whatever it is, I'll have those saved and I can recall them afterwards.
And because you're using violins, let's say, in different octaves or different areas, like C5, C4, C3, C2, and C1, you could use one keyboard and have them all active at the same time. Is that the gist of it?
Not in this one, but in other patches here, yes, I do. Not in this one, but for example, that in this one here, I do have them organized in a way. Let me open this. Yeah. That was loud. But yeah. And so, yes,
it's like an ensemble that you created on your own.
Yes, totally. And that's something that you brought last week, and someone asked, and we couldn't finish that conversation. It was very interesting, and someone said that would be a little bit of a using using Symfobia cheating, and we said, well, yes, it's cheating. But if you've got this project where you've got just $200 and then you've got 4 days, well, you're just Symfobia and that's all they get. In the other hand, though, and I started this story of I've got stories of the USC class back so many years ago. Anyway, we went to John Powell's studio, and the one thing that we all were interested about was to see his template, right? And we found out that it wasn't that big. It was a big template, but it wasn't that big of a template. And the thing that caught my attention was that at some point, John Powell came to his template and he was showing the trumpets, everything, right? Like the trumpets staccato, and the trumpets legato, etc. And at some point he said, and you know what, guys, at some point you gotta have a track like this one. And he just loaded one track and did boom. And we were like, wow, with these big speakers, and it sounded sort of like this, like a big orchestral sound. And he said, when you're composing, sometimes you can just sequence, program everything. If you need an orchestral hit of like a minor, D minor chord, whatever it is, you just, you have it there, and maybe you're just using for that one chord, but you aren't gonna come in here and program every single track. It's gonna take forever. And on top of that, he obviously records everything, so he just has to convince the producer, and then it gets recorded. But these tracks will speed your process up a lot in certain moments. It's like you can have you can build all the woodwind runs. If you've got a library that comes with woodwind runs, you're going to use the library because one, it's going to sound more realistic, and two, it's going to make you work much faster. So that I have this like short thing, and the same thing for the longs, which is here. This bigger orchestral sound. And whenever you are thinking, why can't I compose faster? Well, sometimes those will help. I use those more for sketching. To be honest, I use them for sketching, and then sometimes I leave them there, but most of the times I will reorchestrate or orchestrate on top of that. And then sometimes I'll get rid of them, or sometimes I'll leave them. But yeah, that's it. So yeah, I think that answers both Marshall questions and also yours, Jamie.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Cool. Okay, so if it's okay with you, that's gonna be all for today. We're gonna call it for today. Sorry for the breakdown moment. But yeah, I'm gonna post two links with today's chat. Okay, so yeah, thanks everyone for being here. Great chat, great questions. Looking forward to see you. We've got Chris Jones coming up. Oh, Bobby called. He's been as most of you know, Bobby Fernandez masterclass got postponed 3 weeks ago. I think it is. He got sick, and I didn't know anything from him during those 3 weeks. He called the last day. He's been very sick in the hospital for 3 weeks. He's feeling better now. He's still mentioned he's weak. We are all hoping for a speedy recovery. But obviously the next masterclass is gonna be with Bobby. We aren't gonna replace Bobby, but it may take. He said that he needs some time, so we're gonna check with him, hoping for a speedy recovery. And whenever he feels, he obviously is looking forward for that masterclass. But
Did we lose him again?
I think we lost Mark again.
The best moment.
All right, gentlemen, y'all have a good day.
Yeah, take care, guys.
Okay, see you guys. See you.
Later.
Bye.
Okay, guys, see you. Bye bye.
Okay, bye.